Prestige Mind Collections presents this audiobook, The 7 Laws of Influence That Actually Work, based on psychology. Introduction: The Invisible Scripts. Have you ever changed your mind without quite knowing why? Have you ever felt a sudden, compelling urge to say yes to something you were about to refuse a moment before? What was the invisible tripwire that altered your decision? Was it the words the other person used, or something deeper, a hidden current of human connection you couldn't see but definitely felt? We move through our lives believing we are the sole authors of our choices, the captains of our own ships. But what if I told you that for much of your life, you've been reading from a script you never knew existed? These scripts are written in the ancient language of psychology, etched into our minds by millennia of social evolution. They are the shortcuts our brains use to navigate the dizzying complexity of human interaction. They dictate why we trust a certain stranger but not another. They explain why we feel indebted to one person and dismissive of someone else. They are the reason a crowd can sway us, an expert can convince us, and the fear of losing something can make us act irrationally. These scripts are not magic, they are the mechanics of influence. And once you see them, you can never unsee them again. For the first time, you will see the matrix. Welcome to the 7 Laws of Influence That Actually Work, based on psychology, a production of Prestige Mind Collections. I am not here to give you a list of tricks or manipulative tactics. To do so would be to underestimate the profound nature of these principles. Manipulation is a fleeting, hollow victory that leaves relationships fractured. True influence is something else entirely. It's the art of building bridges between minds, of creating genuine consensus, and of guiding people toward outcomes that are mutually beneficial. It is the bedrock of leadership, the cornerstone of meaningful relationships, and the engine of personal and professional progress. To understand these laws is to understand the very operating system of human behavior. Think of a time you walked into a negotiation. You had your facts, your figures, your logical arguments all lined up. Yet, the conversation went nowhere. It was like pushing against a locked door. Now, imagine a different scenario. Imagine someone who walks into that same room, finds a piece of common ground, a shared hometown, a mutual acquaintance, and suddenly, the door doesn't need to be pushed. It swings open on its own. That person wasn't using better logic, they were using a different key. They understood the law of liking. Or consider the immense power of a simple, unsolicited favor. In 1985, Ethiopia, a nation gripped by famine and poverty, sent $5,000 in aid to Mexico City following a devastating earthquake. Why? It was a gesture that baffled economists. But it made perfect sense to psychologists. In 1935, when Italy invaded Ethiopia, Mexico was one of the only nations to condemn the act. 50 years later, a generation later, the Ethiopian people felt the pull of an unpaid social debt. That is the incredible, time-bending power of the law of reciprocity. It's a force more powerful than economic interest, a script that runs across generations. In this audiobook, we are going to pull back the curtain on these forces. We will journey together into the stories of real people and real events where these laws have shaped history, built fortunes, and defined the course of individual lives. We won't just define them, we will deconstruct them. We'll explore the deep psychological triggers that give them their power, the need to belong, the desire for certainty, the fear of loss. You will learn to recognize these principles at play in your own life, in the advertisements you see, in the dynamics of your workplace, and in the conversations you have with your loved ones. This knowledge is a form of power, and like any power, it comes with a responsibility. The purpose of this journey is not to learn how to convince people for selfish gain. It is to become a more perceptive and effective human being. It is to protect yourself from those who would use these principles against you unethically. And it is to learn how to apply them with integrity, to foster collaboration, to lead with empathy, and to build the kinds of relationships that are founded on trust and mutual understanding. So, prepare yourself. We are about to explore the 7 fundamental laws that govern the science of persuasion. By the end of our time together, the world will not look the same. You will hear conversations differently. You will understand people's motivations more clearly. And you will finally hold the keys to the invisible scripts that shape our world. Chapter 1: The Law of Reciprocity, the Unpaid Debt. What is the weight of a simple gift? Is it measured in grams and ounces, or in the silent, invisible currency of obligation? Why does a small, unsolicited favor from a stranger feel heavier than a planned, expected transaction? Have you ever felt the strange compulsion to help someone you barely know, simply because they once held a door for you? This feeling is not a weakness, it is a feature of your humanity. It is a social glue so powerful it can bind entire societies together, yet so subtle it can be triggered by something as trivial as a free sample at a grocery store. We believe our generosity is a choice, a product of conscious kindness. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful drivers of giving is not the desire to provide, but the deep, primal urge to repay? This urge is a reflex, an ancient instinct that predates written law and formal contracts. It governs the unspoken rules of our relationships and the flow of our social lives. It ensures that for every action, there is a reaction, for every gift, a debt. This is the oldest and most fundamental script of human interaction. It is the engine of cooperation, the trigger for connection, and, in the wrong hands, a potent weapon of influence. To understand this law is to understand why no gesture is ever truly free. This is the story of the unpaid debt. In the winter of 1974, a sociologist at Brigham Young University named Philip Koons decided to conduct a curious little experiment. It was born from a simple observation, the predictable, almost mechanical nature of holiday greetings. You send a card, you get one back. But Koons wanted to test the limits of this social contract. He wanted to know if the obligation was tied to the relationship, or if it was something more automatic, more reflexive. So, he embarked on a project that his colleagues likely found charmingly eccentric. He compiled a list of names and addresses from a telephone directory. These were not friends, colleagues, or even distant acquaintances. They were complete and utter strangers. Working with his wife, Koons meticulously handwrote personal notes on 600 Christmas cards. They included a warm message and a photograph of their smiling family. Then, they sealed the envelopes, placed a stamp on each one, and sent them out into the world, a flurry of goodwill directed at people who had no idea who the Koons family was. It was a simple, one-way gesture. There was no request, no follow-up, no logical reason for anyone to respond. In the cold calculus of modern life, those 600 cards should have vanished into a void of polite confusion. Most people, upon receiving a card from a family they've never met, would likely shrug, perhaps comment on the oddity, and toss it in the bin. But that's not what happened. In the days and weeks that followed, something remarkable began to occur. A card arrived in the Koons family mailbox. Then another. And another. Soon, it was a steady stream. These were not just pre-printed cards signed with a name. Many contained long, handwritten letters, some spanning multiple pages, detailing the lives, jobs, and children of these strangers. They shared news, they shared family photos of their own, and they all wished the Koons family a happy holiday in return. They were responding as if to a dear friend they had simply lost touch with. By the time the experiment concluded, Philip Koons had received over 200 replies. A full third of the strangers he had sent a card to felt an overwhelming psychological need to send one back. Think about that. These were busy people, in the middle of the hectic holiday season, who took the time and money to find a card, write a personal note, and mail it to a family they did not know, all to settle a social debt they never asked for. Some replies even continued to trickle in for years afterward. The initial, unsolicited gift from Koons had created a powerful, undeniable sense of obligation. He had tapped into one of the most potent forces in social psychology: the law of reciprocity. This law is the invisible thread that holds the fabric of society together. It states that we are all wired with a deep-seated need to repay, in kind, what another person has provided us. The anthropologist Richard Leakey considered it the very foundation of what makes us human, a unique adaptive mechanism that allows for the division of labor, the trade of goods, and the creation of interdependent relationships. If a prehistoric hunter shared his kill with another, he did so with the implicit understanding that the favor would be returned in the future. This system of mutual obligation allowed our ancestors to thrive. The power of this law does not lie in logic. It lies in the uncomfortable feeling of indebtedness. We are conditioned to dislike being in a state of obligation. It feels like a weight, a social imbalance that we are compelled to correct. And this is where the law becomes a fascinating tool of persuasion. Because the rule is so powerful, a person can trigger that feeling of indebtedness in you by giving you an uninvited favor. This is precisely what the Hare Krishna movement discovered in the 1970s. Their traditional method of soliciting donations in public spaces was largely unsuccessful. People would avert their eyes, shake their heads, and walk past. So, they changed their strategy. Instead of asking for something, they gave something. A smiling devotee would approach a traveler in an airport, hand them a gift, often a flower or a book like the Bhagavad Gita, and refuse to take it back. "It is a gift for you," they would insist. The traveler, now holding this unsolicited item, was trapped. Their ancient, deeply ingrained reciprocity script had been activated. Though they might not want the flower and had no interest in the book, they now felt a psychological burden. The easiest way to relieve that pressure, to settle the debt, was to give a donation. And so, millions of dollars were raised, not necessarily from people who supported the cause, but from people who simply could not stand the discomfort of an unpaid social obligation. Now that you understand this principle, you will start to see it everywhere. It is that free gift with purchase that makes you feel more committed to a brand. It's the salesman who brings you a coffee during a meeting, creating a subtle feeling of obligation before the negotiation even begins. It's the online service that gives you a 30-day free trial. By the time the trial is over, you feel a sense of loyalty and a reluctance to take something for nothing, making you more likely to subscribe. This isn't always malicious. Often, it's a genuine way to build goodwill. The most effective use of reciprocity is not as a trick, but as a way to initiate a positive relationship. So how do we navigate a world governed by this powerful rule? First, you must learn to recognize when the law is being used on you. If a colleague offers unsolicited help on a project right before they plan to ask you for a major favor, be aware of the dynamic at play. You can accept the help, but by consciously acknowledging the reciprocity principle, you can separate your decision to grant their future favor from the feeling of indebtedness. You can then make a choice based on the merit of their request, not on the weight of the social debt. You can say, "Thank you so much for the help. I really appreciate it. Let me hear what you have in mind," putting you back in control of the interaction. Second, you can use the law ethically to build stronger relationships and become a more effective human being. The key is to be the first to give, and to do so with generosity and without explicit expectation. In your workplace, be the person who shares credit, who offers help, who provides valuable information. You will be building a reservoir of goodwill and social capital. When the time comes that you need support, you will not have to demand it. People will feel a genuine desire to reciprocate your past kindnesses. In your personal life, the most powerful gifts are those of your time, your attention, and your support. These unexpected, heartfelt gestures create the strongest reciprocal bonds of love and loyalty. The law of reciprocity is a fundamental aspect of human behavior. It is a testament to our social nature, a mechanism for building trust and cooperation. Like any powerful tool, it can be used to build or to exploit. But now, it is no longer an invisible script for you. You can see it. You can understand its pull. And you can choose to engage with it consciously, using it not to create debts, but to create connections. You can be the one who gives first, who invests in relationships, and who builds a world of mutual support, one genuine gesture at a time. Chapter 2: The Law of Liking, the Mirror Effect. Why do we instinctively trust some people and not others? What is the invisible chemistry that draws us to one person in a crowded room? Have you ever agreed to something, a proposal, a favor, a purchase, primarily because you simply like the person asking? We pride ourselves on our rational decision-making, on our ability to weigh pros and cons and judge a situation on its merits. But the truth is far more primal. We are not thinking machines, we are feeling machines that think. And one of the most powerful forces that bypasses our logic and speaks directly to our instinct is the simple, profound human connection of liking someone. It's a force that can make a weak argument seem compelling and a strong argument seem irrelevant. It operates in courtrooms, where a lawyer's rapport with a jury can be as crucial as the evidence. It thrives in boardrooms, where deals are often closed not on the fine print, but on the handshake between two people who found common ground. And it lives in our daily lives, quietly shaping our friendships, our alliances, and our choices. We believe we are influenced by the message, but more often than not, we are influenced by the messenger. To overlook this fundamental truth of human behavior is to be blind to one of the most powerful currents of influence that exists. This is the story of the mirror effect, the irresistible power of seeing a likable version of ourselves in another. From 1963 to 1978, a man from Detroit, Michigan, did something that, by all statistical measures, should have been impossible. His name was Joe Girard. His profession was selling cars. Now, selling cars is a notoriously difficult business, built on single, high-stakes transactions with customers who are often wary and skeptical. A good salesperson might sell 5 or 6 cars in a strong month. Joe Girard, however, was not just good. He was a phenomenon. For 12 consecutive years, he was recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's greatest salesman. He sold an average of 6 cars every single day. He sold more than 13,000 vehicles in his 15-year career, almost all of them in one-on-one retail sales. He didn't have a fleet manager or a corporate account. He sold to individuals, one at a time. How did he do it? What was his secret? Was he a master of negotiation? Did he have access to the lowest prices? Was he a brilliant technical expert on every model? No. Joe's secret was something far simpler and far more profound. He understood that his real business wasn't selling cars, it was making people like him. His entire process was engineered around one single principle. He knew that if a customer genuinely liked him, the car, the price, and the features would all become secondary details. The sale would be a natural byproduct of the connection. So, what did he do? He focused on finding similarities. He would ask customers where they were from, what they did for a living, what their kids were passionate about, and he would listen with intense, genuine interest. He became a master at building rapport, at creating a bridge of commonality between himself and the person across the desk. But his real genius was what happened after the sale. Every single month, every one of his thousands of customers received a card in the mail from him. The card's design changed with the season: Happy New Year, Happy Valentine's Day, Happy 4th of July. But on the inside, the message was always the same. It simply said, "I like you." And it was signed, Joe Girard. People thought it was a gimmick, but they couldn't deny its effect. In a world of impersonal transactions, here was one person who remembered them and, more importantly, liked them. When it was time for them to buy a new car, or when a friend or family member needed one, who was the only person they would think of? The man who sent them a card every month telling them they were liked. Joe Girard didn't just sell cars. He sold relationships. He intuitively understood what decades of social psychology research would later confirm: the most effective tool of persuasion is a genuine human connection. This is the law of liking. The principle is startlingly straightforward: we are more likely to say yes to the requests of people we know and like. This seems obvious, but the reasons why we like someone operate on a much deeper, subconscious level. Researchers have pinpointed several key factors that trigger this feeling, and the first, as Joe Girard demonstrated, is similarity. We like people who are like us. This can manifest in shared opinions, personality traits, backgrounds, or even something as simple as a similar style of dress. This is why a skilled communicator will often try to mirror the person they're speaking with, subtly adopting a similar posture, tone of voice, or speech pace. It's not about mimicry, it's about signaling, "I am like you. We are on the same team." Another key component is compliments. We have a fundamental craving for praise, and we tend to like those who provide it. The interesting thing is that this works even when we suspect the flattery may not be entirely sincere. As long as it doesn't feel like an obvious, clumsy manipulation, we tend to develop a positive feeling toward the person offering the compliment. Joe Girard's "I like you" was the ultimate, distilled compliment. It was a direct injection of affection that fostered an automatic, positive association. And this brings us to another classic story of this law in action: the Tupperware party. In the 1950s, Tupperware was a revolutionary product, but it was struggling in retail stores. The solution was to move the transaction from a cold, commercial space into the warmth of a friend's living room. The setup is genius. You are invited to a party not by a stranger, but by a friend you know, trust, and like. The request to buy something doesn't come from a salesperson, it comes from your friend, the hostess, who earns a percentage of the sales. Every purchase you make benefits her directly. This creates a powerful web of social pressure. You are there because of your friendship, and you feel a subtle obligation to support your friend. The decision to buy is now entangled with your relationship. You're no longer just buying a plastic bowl, you're validating a friendship. The power of the Tupperware party has little to do with the product and everything to do with leveraging the pre-existing bonds of liking and affection. So, how do we apply this incredibly powerful human principle in our own lives, ethically and effectively? The first and most crucial rule is authenticity. The law of liking backfires spectacularly when it is perceived as insincere. We have all encountered the salesperson who fakes a common interest. You like golf? I love golf, or offers clumsy, transparent flattery. This doesn't build rapport, it builds suspicion. The goal is not to pretend to be like someone else, but to find genuine points of connection that already exist. Before an important meeting, do a little research. Find a real shared interest, a mutual acquaintance, or a common experience. Highlighting these genuine similarities creates an honest foundation for rapport. Second, become a purveyor of sincere compliments. The world is full of people who are quick to criticize and slow to praise. You can stand out by being the person who notices the good in others and voices it. But be specific. A generic "good job" is forgettable. A specific, "the way you handled that difficult client question with such calm and clarity was truly impressive," shows you were paying attention and is far more impactful. This isn't flattery, it's genuine recognition, and it is a powerful way to foster liking and respect. Finally, focus on cooperation. We tend to like people who are working with us toward a common goal. Frame your interactions not as competitions, but as collaborations. In a negotiation, instead of an us versus them mentality, try to reframe it as, how can we work together to solve this problem? Using inclusive language like we and us helps to break down barriers and signals that you are partners, not adversaries. This collaborative spirit naturally fosters a sense of liking and trust. The law of liking is a quiet force, but its effect on our decisions is profound. It reminds us that logic and data are often just passengers in a car driven by emotion and connection. To build influence, you must first build bridges. Look for the mirror in others. Find the real similarities, celebrate their strengths, and work together toward shared victories. By doing so, you are not just becoming more persuasive. You are becoming a more connected and effective human being. The greatest salesmen, the most effective leaders, and the most beloved friends all understand this simple truth: connection comes before compliance. Chapter 3: The Law of Social Proof, the Wisdom of the Crowd. Have you ever stood on a street corner, waiting for the signal to cross, and then stepped into the road simply because a few other people did? Did you check for traffic yourself, or did you outsource your safety to the judgment of strangers? Why does an empty restaurant feel like a mistake, while a bustling one with a long queue feels like a promise of quality? What is this powerful, invisible magnetism that pulls us toward the crowd? We see ourselves as individuals, as independent thinkers charting our own course. Yet, time and time again, when faced with uncertainty, we turn our heads to see what everyone else is doing. This instinct is not a sign of weakness, it is one of the most fundamental survival mechanisms in our psychological arsenal. It's a shortcut, a heuristic that has saved us countless hours of deliberation and, in our evolutionary past, likely saved our lives. If the entire tribe started running, it was wise to run first and ask questions later. But in the modern world, this ancient script can be hijacked. It can be used to make us laugh at jokes that aren't funny, to buy products we don't need, and even, in its darkest moments, to absolve us of our personal responsibility. This is the story of the silent consensus. It is the story of how the actions of the many become the truth for the one. This is the undeniable power of the crowd. In the early 1950s, a television network executive had a problem. TV was booming, but live studio audiences were unpredictable. Some nights they would laugh at every joke, giving the show a vibrant, infectious energy. Other nights, they would be quiet, and the comedy would fall flat, making the actors nervous and the show feel awkward to the millions watching at home. The quality of a multi-million-dollar production was at the mercy of the mood of a few hundred random people. A sound engineer named Charlie Douglas saw this not as a problem, but as an opportunity. He embarked on a secretive, painstaking project to create the perfect audience. He spent years recording and categorizing laughter. He had big laughs, small chuckles, rolling guffaws, and gentle titters. He had laughs from men, women, and children. He compiled a massive library of human mirth on reel-to-reel tape. Then, he built a machine that looked like a large, unwieldy organ, with keys and a foot pedal that allowed him to play the laughter, mixing and matching reactions to create a seamless, customized audience track. He called it the Laugh Box. When he first presented it to producers, they were skeptical, even a little insulted. They believed in the authenticity of a live performance. But they were also desperate for consistency, so they gave it a try. The effect was immediate and astonishing. Jokes that had previously died in silence now received roaring applause. Mediocre scenes suddenly felt hilarious. The canned laughter told the home audience when to laugh, and they dutifully obliged. Shows like The Flintstones, The Munsters, and Bewitched all used Charlie's Laugh Box. For decades, audiences were guided by these disembodied, pre-recorded reactions. What's most fascinating is that studies later confirmed the phenomenon. Even when people know the laughter is fake, they still rate the material as funnier. The sound of others laughing provides a powerful cue, a social signal that this content is humorous, and our brains, eager for a shortcut, simply agree. Charlie Douglas hadn't just solved a technical problem, he had commercialized one of the most powerful principles of human behavior, the law of social proof. The law is simple: we determine what is correct by finding out what other people think is correct. When we are unsure of ourselves, when the situation is ambiguous, we look to the actions of others as a guide for our own behavior. We assume that if a lot of people are doing something, it must be the right thing to do. This principle is most potent under two key conditions: uncertainty and similarity. When we are uncertain, we are most likely to look for clues. And we are most influenced by the proof provided by people we perceive as being similar to us. Everyday examples are everywhere. A bartender will salt their tip jar at the beginning of a shift, placing a few of their own bills inside to give the impression that tipping is the normal and expected behavior. The producers of a charity telethon will spend an inordinate amount of time listing the names of viewers who have already donated, sending a powerful signal to those still watching: other people are giving, and you should too. In the digital age, this law has become the engine of e-commerce. We are guided by the 5-star review, that customers who bought this also bought, suggestions, and the number of likes on a post. A product with thousands of positive reviews feels like a safe, validated choice. A product with none feels like a risk. We are trusting the wisdom of a crowd of strangers. But this reliance on the crowd has a dark side. A moment of collective uncertainty can lead to a terrifying collective inaction. This was tragically demonstrated on a March night in 1964 in Queens, New York. A young woman named Catherine Genovese, known to her friends as Kitty, was returning home from her job as a bar manager. As she walked from her car, she was attacked. She screamed for help. "Oh, my God, he stabbed me. Please help me." Lights turned on in the surrounding apartment buildings. A few windows opened. One person shouted, "Let that girl alone." The attacker was momentarily scared off, but then he returned. Over the next half hour, he attacked her 2 more times, as she crawled, bleeding, toward the back of her building. The initial newspaper reports, which became legendary in social psychology, stated that 38 of her neighbors had witnessed the attack from their windows, but not a single person called the police until it was far too late. While the number 38 has since been debated, the core, chilling reality remains: multiple people heard and saw something, yet nobody acted decisively. Why? Were these 38 people all cruel, apathetic monsters? No. They were ordinary people caught in the grip of social proof's dark side, a phenomenon now known as the bystander effect. Imagine you are one of those neighbors. You are woken by a scream. You look out your window and see a confusing scene. You are uncertain. Is it a lover's quarrel? Is someone in real danger? You look at the other windows. You see other lights on, other silhouettes watching. And you see that nobody is doing anything. Nobody is calling the police. Nobody is running down to help. In your moment of uncertainty, the inaction of others becomes your guide. You think, if it were really serious, someone else would have surely called for help by now. You assume others know more than you do. The tragic irony is that everyone else is looking at your window, thinking the exact same thing. In a crowd, responsibility becomes diffused. The social proof of inaction creates a collective paralysis. So how do we navigate a world where the pull of the crowd is so strong? First, you must learn to inoculate yourself against faulty social proof. When you see a long line outside a new club or a product hyped by thousands on social media, take a moment to pause. Ask yourself, is this crowd's wisdom based on genuine quality, or is it just momentum? Is the crowd reacting to the evidence, or is the crowd itself the only evidence? Developing the habit of questioning the autopilot of social proof, especially when it's being used to sell you something, is a critical skill for modern life. Second, you can use social proof ethically to create positive momentum and influence. If you are trying to champion a new initiative at work, don't go it alone. Find a few respected colleagues to support it first. Their early adoption provides the initial social proof that will make others feel more comfortable joining in. If you run a business, don't just tell customers your product is great, show them. Use genuine testimonials, case studies, and data that demonstrate your popularity and effectiveness. Let the stories of your satisfied customers become the social proof that persuades new ones. But the most important lesson from the law of social proof is a personal one. It is the lesson of Kitty Genovese. When you are in an emergency and need help, you must break the spell of the bystander effect. Don't just shout help into a crowd. Single one person out. Point to them. Look them in the eye. Say, you, in the blue jacket, call 999 right now. By doing this, you shatter the diffusion of responsibility. You assign a specific task to a specific person, removing their uncertainty and the social proof of inaction. Conversely, if you find yourself in a crowd during an emergency, you must be the one to break the paralysis. Assume you are the only one who can help. Be the first to act. Your action will provide a new, powerful form of social proof for others to follow. The crowd offers safety, comfort, and a valuable shortcut in a complex world. But the crowd is not infallible. It does not have a conscience. That is reserved for the individual. Understanding this law is about knowing when to trust the wisdom of the many, and, more importantly, when to trust the courage and conviction of the one, yourself. Chapter 4 of the Law of Authority, the Expert's Shadow. What is the difference between respect and obedience? Where is the line between following expert advice and blindly surrendering your own judgment? Have you ever felt your own opinion waver in the presence of someone with an impressive title or a uniform? Why does a white lab coat seem to grant its wearer an aura of unquestionable truth? We are taught from birth to respect authority, our parents, our teachers, our leaders. It is the foundation of social order, the system that allows complex societies to function. Without this deference to legitimate expertise, chaos would reign. But this instinct, this deeply ingrained reflex to obey, is a double-edged sword. It can be a vital shortcut to sound decisions, but it can also be a switch that turns off our own critical thinking, our empathy, and even our conscience. What happens when the instructions of an authority figure conflict with the cries of another human being? How far would you go in obeying an order you believed was causing someone else pain? You might say you would stop, that you would refuse. But the unsettling truth is, you don't really know what you would do when you are standing in the long, dark shadow of an expert. This is the story of how easily good people can be led to do terrible things. This is the unnerving power of authority. In the summer of 1961, an advertisement appeared in the New Haven, Connecticut newspaper. It offered $4.50 for an hour of a person's time. All they had to do was participate in a study of memory and learning at the prestigious Yale University. The men who responded came from all walks of life: postal clerks, high school teachers, engineers, and laborers. They arrived at an elegant laboratory on campus and were greeted by a stern, impassive man in a gray technician's coat who introduced himself as the experimenter. Also present was another participant, a friendly, slightly overweight, middle-aged man who was actually a Confederate in the study. The man in the lab coat explained the premise: the study would test whether punishment helped people learn more effectively. One person would be the teacher, and the other would be the learner. A rigged draw was held, and the volunteer was always assigned the role of teacher. The teacher watched as the learner was strapped into a chair in an adjacent room, an electrode attached to his wrist. The teacher was then seated in front of an imposing shock generator. It was a terrifying-looking machine, with a row of 30 switches, each labeled with a voltage, starting at 15 volts and increasing in 15-volt increments all the way to 450 volts. The switches were also labeled with descriptions, ranging from slight shock to danger, severe shock. The final two switches were ominously marked with just XXX. The task was simple. The teacher would read a list of word pairs to the learner. The learner would then have to recall the correct matching word. For every wrong answer, the teacher was instructed to flip a switch and deliver an electric shock, increasing the voltage by one level for each subsequent error. The learner, the friendly man from the waiting room, mentioned he had a mild heart condition, but the experimenter coolly assured everyone that the shocks, though painful, would cause no permanent tissue damage. The experiment began. The first few mistakes were met with 15 volts, then 30, then 45. The teacher could hear grunts of pain from the other room. At 120 volts, the learner shouted that the shocks were becoming painful. At 150 volts, he cried out, "Experimenter, get me out of here. I won't be in the experiment anymore. I refuse to go on." This was the critical moment. The teacher, now visibly distressed, would turn to the man in the lab coat for guidance. But the experimenter would not relent. He would respond with a sequence of 4 calm, authoritative prods: "Please continue," or "The experiment requires that you continue." If the teacher still hesitated, he would say, "It is absolutely essential that you continue." And finally, "You have no other choice, you must go on." The learner's protests escalated into agonized screams, then desperate banging on the wall. After 330 volts, he fell silent. Yet, the man in the lab coat insisted that silence be treated as a wrong answer and that the shocks continue, all the way to the final, 450-volt switch. What you are hearing is the now infamous Milgram experiment, one of the most consequential and controversial studies in the history of social psychology. Before it began, Stanley Milgram polled his colleagues, psychiatrists at a leading medical school, asking them how many people they thought would go all the way to 450 volts. They predicted that only a tiny fraction, perhaps 1 in 1,000, the sadistic fringe of society, would do so. They were wrong. In the initial study, a staggering 65% of the participants, ordinary, decent citizens, obeyed the experimenter and administered the full 450-volt shock to a silent, unresponsive stranger. They were not monsters. They were sweating, trembling, and pleading to stop. They argued with the experimenter. But when faced with the calm, unwavering instructions of a legitimate authority figure in a respected institution, the majority of them overrode their own conscience. The experimenter's authority was more powerful than a stranger's screams of pain. This is the chilling reality of the law of authority. This law states that we are socialized to obey legitimate authority figures. This conditioning begins in childhood and is reinforced by every social structure we encounter, from the classroom to the workplace to the legal system. It functions as a valuable mental shortcut. Instead of analyzing every detail of a complex situation, we can defer to an expert, a doctor, a pilot, a financial advisor, and trust their judgment. In most cases, this serves us well. But the Milgram experiment reveals the profound danger of this shortcut. Our sense of personal responsibility can abdicate in the face of a command from on high. The participants didn't feel they were the ones hurting the learner, they saw themselves as a mere instrument, a tool being used by the experimenter, who was the one truly responsible. This is not a phenomenon confined to a laboratory. Consider the real-world medical case known as the rectal earache. A doctor needed to treat a patient for an ear infection and wrote a prescription for eardrops. On the prescription, he abbreviated "place in right ear" as "place in our ear." The note was sent down to the ward, where the attending nurse on duty read it. She looked at the doctor's handwriting, looked at the bottle of eardrops, and proceeded to administer the full dose of drops into the patient's rectum. It sounds like an absurd, comical error. But it's a perfect example of the authority principle in action. The nurse was uncertain. The instruction "place in our ear" could plausibly be misread as "place in rear." In her moment of uncertainty, she deferred to the authority of the doctor's written command. It likely seemed strange to her, but her internal script, "the doctor knows best, do not question the doctor," was more powerful than her own professional reasoning. She followed the order, not her own expertise. This deference is often triggered not by actual authority, but by the mere symbols of it. The first is titles. A person introduced as professor is immediately perceived as more knowledgeable and even taller than someone introduced as a student. The second is clothing. A uniform, like a police officer's, or even a well-tailored business suit, can trigger our obedient script. In one study, a man in a business suit jaywalked against the light. A full 350% more people followed him into the street than when the same man did it while dressed in casual clothes. His suit was a symbol of authority that signaled it was safe to follow. So how do we harness the positive side of authority while protecting ourselves from its dangers? First, if you are in a position of authority, understand its weight. Your words and instructions carry a force that goes beyond their content. Foster an environment where people feel safe to question you. The best leaders, the best doctors, the best managers actively encourage dissent. They know that unquestioning obedience leads to errors like the rectal earache. Your goal is not to create followers who obey, but to cultivate a team that thinks. Furthermore, your authority should be built on genuine expertise and trustworthiness, not just on a title or a suit. When you demonstrate your knowledge and act with integrity, you earn legitimate authority that doesn't need to command, it naturally inspires. Second, and more importantly, we must all learn to develop a healthy, critical awareness of our own obedience reflex. When you are given an instruction by an authority figure that makes you feel uncomfortable or seems illogical, you must train yourself to pause and ask two crucial questions. The first is this authority truly an expert? Are they a legitimate expert in this specific field, or are they just using the symbols of authority to create an impression? The actor in a commercial wearing a lab coat is not a medical expert. A celebrity endorsing a financial product is not a financial advisor. The second question is, what does this expert have to gain? Are they offering impartial advice, or are they a persuasion professional who stands to benefit from your compliance? This questioning is not about becoming cynical or disrespectful. It is about re-engaging your own critical thinking. It's about remembering that even in the presence of the world's foremost expert, you are still the one who is ultimately responsible for your own actions. Milgram's experiment taught us a terrifying lesson about ourselves. But its true value is not in showing us how weak we are, but in warning us of a weakness we can, with conscious effort, overcome. True authority is not the power to command, it is the wisdom to know when to question. Chapter 5, The Law of Scarcity, the Fear of Missing Out. Why does the last cookie in the jar always seem to taste the best? Why does the thought of a sold-out concert feel more desirable than one with tickets still available? What is the magnetic pull of the limited edition, the exclusive offer, the door that is about to close? Have you ever felt a pang of panic when a website flashed the words "only 2 left in stock"? Did that message make you want the item more? We are creatures of logic, or so we tell ourselves. We assess value based on quality, utility, and price. And yet, one of the most powerful triggers for human desire has nothing to do with an item's intrinsic worth. It is a simple, primal, and often irrational response to a single perception, its dwindling availability. The possibility of loss is a far more powerful motivator than the possibility of gain. We are wired to fear missing out, to protect our options, and to crave that which we cannot have. This instinct is so potent that it can make us desire something we previously had no interest in, simply because it is about to be taken away. It is the engine of the auction house, the secret weapon of the marketer, and the source of our most impulsive decisions. This is the story of how the fear of loss can create value out of thin air. This is the irresistible influence of scarcity. On April 23, 1985, the Coca-Cola Company made what it believed was the single best business decision in its 100-year history. After years of secret research, hundreds of thousands of blind taste tests, and millions of dollars in development, they announced they were changing the sacred, 99-year-old formula for their flagship drink. The new product, dubbed New Coke, was smoother, sweeter, and scientifically proven to be superior. In blind taste tests, it consistently beat not only the original formula but also their chief rival, Pepsi. The data was unequivocal. The research was flawless. The launch was set to be a masterstroke, a bold move that would reinvigorate the brand and cement its dominance for generations to come. What happened next was one of the most spectacular, shocking, and instructive product failures in modern history. The public reaction was not just negative, it was immediate, emotional, and visceral. The company's headquarters in Atlanta was flooded with tens of thousands of angry phone calls and letters. People spoke about the original Coke not as a soft drink, but as a cherished institution, a piece of their childhood, an American icon. Protest groups formed. Loyal customers began hoarding cases of the original formula, driving to the ends of their states to buy up the last remaining stock. One man in Texas drove to a local bottler and bought $1,000 worth, calling it a priceless possession. The company's executives were stunned. They had given the public a product that was demonstrably, scientifically better. They had the data to prove it. But they had failed to account for a force far more powerful than flavor preference. By announcing that the original formula would be gone forever, they hadn't just introduced a new product, they had created a scarcity of an old one. They had taken away a freedom, a choice that consumers had always had, and in doing so, triggered a massive, nationwide wave of what social psychologists call psychological reactance. People didn't just want their old Coke back, they felt a deep, burning need to reclaim what had been taken from them. After 79 agonizing days of relentless public outcry, a humbled Coca-Cola executive team held another press conference. They announced the return of the original formula, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic. The news led the national broadcast that evening, pushing aside reports on a hostage crisis and a presidential arms control summit. When the original Coke returned to store shelves, there was widespread celebration. Its sales skyrocketed. It was no longer just a drink, it was a symbol of a freedom reclaimed. The company had stumbled backward into a profound lesson in human behavior: don't tell people what they can have, tell them what they can't have. This is the essence of the law of scarcity. The principle is this: opportunities seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited. This works for two primary reasons. The first is a simple mental shortcut. We have learned, over millennia, that things that are difficult to acquire are typically better than things that are easy to acquire. A rare gem, a difficult-to-hunt animal, a high-level skill, all are valuable in part because they are scarce. So, we use an item's availability as a quick and easy indicator of its quality. If everyone wants it and it's almost sold out, our brain tells us it must be good. The second reason is the more powerful one, the one that drove the new Coke fiasco: psychological reactance. As human beings, we have a deep love for our freedom of choice. When that freedom is threatened or taken away, we experience an immediate, negative reaction. We are motivated to restore that freedom, and the most common way to do that is to desire, and try to possess, the forbidden item more than ever. It's the Romeo and Juliet effect. The more their parents forbade their love, the more intensely they desired one another. It's the reason a child who is indifferent to a toy will suddenly want it desperately the moment another child tries to play with it. The scarcity wasn't in the toy itself, it was in the freedom to play with it. This was demonstrated perfectly in a simple but brilliant experiment conducted in 1975. Researchers Stephen Wurtzel and his colleagues gave participants a cookie from a jar and asked them to rate its quality. For half the participants, the jar was full, containing 10 cookies. For the other half, the jar was nearly empty, containing only 2. The cookies in both jars were identical. Yet, the participants who took a cookie from the nearly empty jar consistently rated it as more desirable, more attractive, and even more expensive than the exact same cookie from the full jar. The scarcity of the cookies made them seem better. The researchers then took it a step further. In some cases, they made the cookies scarce from the beginning. In others, they started with a full jar of 10, and then an experimenter would come in, take away 8 of them, and explain that the cookies were needed for other participants. This group, the ones who saw their abundant supply suddenly become scarce due to social demand, rated the cookies as the most desirable of all. It was the combination of scarcity and the competition from others that sent their desire into overdrive. Once you are aware of this law, you see its fingerprints everywhere, especially in the world of sales and marketing. It's the limited time offer that puts a deadline on your decision, forcing you to act now for fear of the opportunity vanishing. It's the online travel site that shows you only one room left at this price, creating a sense of urgency and competition with unseen other buyers. It's the art gallery that puts a red dot on a painting to show it's been sold, immediately making the artist's other work seem more valuable and desirable. It's that exclusive access offered to VIP members, framing information or products as a scarce resource available only to a select few. All of these tactics are designed to shift your brain away from the question, "Do I want this?" and toward the question, "When will I be able to get this again?" So, how do we navigate this world of manufactured urgency and make clear-headed decisions? The first step is to learn to recognize the feeling. When you feel that hot, rising sense of panic or excitement in a sales situation, that is your emotional red flag. That feeling is your scarcity brain taking over from your rational brain. The moment you feel it, you must consciously pause. The very purpose of scarcity tactics is to prevent you from thinking. Your best defense is to give yourself the time and space to do exactly that. Step away from the computer. Tell the salesperson you need to think about it. The immediate emotional rush will almost always subside, allowing your logical mind to come back online. Once you have paused, you must ask yourself the crucial question, why do I want this? Do you want it for its actual utility, for the function it will serve in your life? Or do you want it primarily because it's scarce? Separate the item from its availability. Would you want this product just as much if there were millions of them in stock and you could buy it any day of the week? Would you pay the same price for it at an ordinary store as you would at a frantic, high-stakes auction? By disentangling the merit of the item from the emotion of scarcity, you can make a far more rational choice. Finally, it's important to understand the ethical line. Using scarcity is not inherently evil. If you are selling a handmade piece of furniture that is genuinely one of a kind, highlighting its uniqueness is honest. If you are running a seasonal promotion that has a real, firm deadline, it is fair to inform your customers. This is providing truthful information that helps them make a decision. The ethical line is crossed when scarcity is fabricated. The website with a fake countdown timer that resets every time you refresh the page, the retailer who claims a limited stock when the warehouse is full, this is not persuasion, it is deception. As a consumer, be wary of these tactics. And as an influencer or business person, know that while they may create a short-term sale, they destroy the long-term foundation of trust. The law of scarcity is a powerful, deeply ingrained feature of human behavior. It shows us that our decisions are often swayed not by what we have to gain, but by what we stand to lose. By understanding this, you can protect yourself from being rushed into poor choices. And you can learn that the greatest prize is not the limited edition item, but the freedom of a calm, considered, and conscious decision. Chapter 6. The Law of Commitment and Consistency, the Web of Our Words. Have you ever agreed to a small request, only to find yourself agreeing to a much larger one later? Why is it that after publicly stating an opinion, we become almost deaf to arguments on the other side? What is the invisible force that compels us to defend a decision, even long after we suspect it might have been a mistake? This force is not logic. It is not reason. It is the deep, quiet, and relentless human need to be consistent. We have a profound desire for our beliefs, our words, and our actions to align in a neat, orderly row. This drive is a cornerstone of our personality, a compass that guides our behavior. In a complex world, consistency is a luxury. It saves us from the exhausting work of re-evaluating our choices every single day. It projects an image of stability, integrity, and intellectual strength. But this internal compass can be hijacked. A small, initial step in one direction can set us on a path we never intended to walk, pulled forward by the powerful need to remain consistent with our past selves. The web of commitment is spun with a single, slender thread, yet it can hold us fast. This is the story of how a tiny yes can change your future. This is the power of the consistent self. In the mid-1960s, a pair of social psychologists, Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser, conducted a brilliantly simple experiment in a quiet, suburban neighborhood in California. They went door to door with a request so outrageous it was almost comical. They asked homeowners if they would be willing to help a public service campaign about driving safety. The help they needed was for the homeowners to install a massive, Paula-lettered sign on their pristine front lawns. The sign read, simply, "Drive carefully." To ensure there was no ambiguity, the researchers showed the residents a photograph of what it would look like, a huge, ugly billboard almost completely obscuring the view of their house. As you can imagine, the vast majority of people refused. In the first group they tested, only 17%, less than 1 in 5, agreed to this absurd proposition. This was the baseline, the expected result. Sensible people do not want a monstrous sign defacing their property. But then, the researchers approached a second group of homeowners in a nearly identical neighborhood. This time, however, they started with a different approach. A few weeks earlier, a different volunteer had gone to their doors and asked them if they would be willing to accept a tiny, 3-inch square sticker that said "Be a safe driver" and place it in a corner of their window. The request was trivial, almost effortless to fulfill. Nearly everyone agreed. They took the little sticker, placed it on their window, and likely forgot all about it. But they had done something crucial. They had made a small, active, public commitment. They had, in a tiny way, identified themselves as citizens who cared about and supported the cause of safe driving. 2 weeks later, a new volunteer came to their doors and made the same outrageous request as before, asking them to install the gigantic "Drive Carefully" sign on their lawn. The results were astonishing. In this group, an incredible 76% of the homeowners agreed. Let that sink in. The number of people willing to accept the enormous, unsightly billboard skyrocketed from 17% to 76%. What happened in those 2 weeks? The lawns didn't change. The sign didn't get any prettier. The homeowners did. By agreeing to that first, tiny request, they had subtly altered their own self-image. They now saw themselves as the kind of people who take a stand for driver safety. When the second, much larger request came, refusing it would have created a jarring internal dissonance. It would have been inconsistent with the commitment they had already made. To maintain their newly formed identity, they were willing to go to absurd lengths. They had been snared by the law of commitment and consistency. This powerful law of influence states that once we make a choice or take a stand, especially a public one, we feel an enormous internal and external pressure to behave consistently with that commitment. This internal pressure comes from our own self-image. We want to believe we are rational, trustworthy people. Flipping on our decisions feels weak and erratic. The external pressure comes from society. A person whose beliefs, words, and deeds don't match is often seen as confused, two-faced, or even mentally unstable. Consistency, on the other hand, is associated with personal and intellectual strength. It is the heart of logic, rationality, and integrity. Because consistency is such a valued and efficient trait, we can fall into the habit of being consistent automatically, even when it is not wise to do so. This is the foot-in-the-door technique that Friedman and Fraser so brilliantly demonstrated. A persuader can start with a small, easy-to-grant request that gets their foot in the door of your mind. That initial, small commitment then acts as a foundation, making you far more likely to agree to larger, related requests down the line, all in the service of remaining consistent with your initial choice. The power of this principle is most potent when the commitment is active, public, and effortful. Consider the power of writing things down. A verbal agreement can be forgotten or reinterpreted. But a written commitment is a physical piece of evidence. It stares back at you, a concrete testament to your decision. This is why many sales organizations insist that the customer, not the salesperson, fills out the order form. That physical act of writing down the details of the purchase is a powerful committing action. It solidifies the choice. A darker and more profound example of this principle comes from the Korean War. American prisoners of war were held in Chinese-run camps where the captors used a surprisingly effective method of collaboration, which they called their lenient policy. It relied not on torture or brutality, but on a slow, insidious application of commitment and consistency. They would start small. They would ask the American prisoners to make slightly anti-American or pro-communist statements that were so minor they seemed inconsequential, such as, "The United States is not perfect." Then, they would ask the prisoner to write this statement down in a notebook and sign his name. Later, they might ask him to read his list of problems with America in a discussion group with other prisoners. Then, he might be asked to write a full essay on the topic. The Chinese would then broadcast these essays back to other prison camps or read them on the camp radio, often identifying the author by name. The prisoner, having made these active, public, and effortful commitments, began to change his own self-image to align with his actions. He started to believe what he had written. He had taken a stand, and now the immense pressure to remain consistent was pulling him further and further away from his original identity. He was collaborating with the enemy, not because he was tortured, but because he was led, step by tiny step, down a path of escalating commitment. This same pressure is at work in our everyday lives. It's why making a New Year's resolution public by telling your friends makes you more likely to stick with it. It's why brand loyalty is so powerful. Once we decide we are a Nike person or an Apple person, we tend to filter information through that lens, defending our chosen brand and ignoring its flaws to remain consistent with our past purchases. So, how do we harness this powerful force for good and protect ourselves from its manipulative use? To make positive changes in your own life, use the power of active, public, and effortful commitments. Don't just think about your goals, write them down. The physical act of writing makes the goal more real and your commitment more concrete. Share that goal with people whose opinions you value. This public declaration creates a new layer of accountability and a new self-image you will be motivated to uphold. If you want to start exercising, don't just buy a gym membership. Schedule your workouts, pay a trainer in advance, and tell a friend you'll meet them there. Each step is a small commitment that makes it harder to be inconsistent later. To protect yourself, you must learn to listen to your body. Social psychologists have found we often feel our resistance to a foolish consistency in two places. The first is in the pit of our stomach. When you feel that sinking, queasy feeling right after agreeing to something, it's a signal from your core that you are being trapped into a commitment you don't truly want. That is the moment to pause. The second signal is what's been called a heart of hearts sign. This is a quieter feeling, a subtle first flash of knowing that a commitment is wrong before our rationalizing brain kicks in to defend it. You must learn to ask yourself a crucial question: knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, would I make the same commitment? If the answer is no, then you must find the courage to be inconsistent. There is no virtue in stubbornly sticking to a bad decision. A foolish consistency, as the essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, is the hobgoblin of little minds. Give yourself permission to say, I've received new information, or simply, I've changed my mind. A truly strong and intelligent person is not one who never deviates, but one who knows when a course correction is necessary. The law of commitment and consistency is the silent narrator of our life story. It takes our past actions and uses them to write our future script. By understanding this, you can become a more conscious author of your own life. You can use small, wise commitments to build a better future, and you can find the strength to edit the parts of your story that no longer serve you. Your past does not have to be a prison. It can be a foundation, but you, and you alone, are the architect. Chapter 7: The Law of Unity, the Power of We. What is the most powerful word in the language of human connection? Is it please? Is it thank you? Is it even love? We have spent our time together exploring the intricate mechanics of influence, the depths of reciprocity, the warmth of liking, the pull of the crowd. We've seen the power of authority, the panic of scarcity, and the web of our own commitments. Each is a potent force, a hidden script that guides our behavior. But what if there was one law that could amplify, and in some cases, even supersede all the others? What if the ultimate key to persuasion was not about what you do or what you say, but about who you are in relation to the person you wish to influence? This final principle is not about building rapport, it is about sharing an identity. It's not about getting someone to like you, it's about them seeing you as part of them. This is the realm of us, the circle of we, the tribe of our people. When someone is in this circle, the normal rules of persuasion are suspended. We trust them more deeply, forgive them more easily, and support them more fiercely. Their requests are not filtered through the skeptical mind of a stranger, but are heard with the open heart of a kinsman. This is the most primal and profound source of human influence. This is the story of the shared self. This is the undeniable power of unity. Imagine a man named David. David is a successful, rational, and financially prudent individual. One Tuesday afternoon, he gets a frantic phone call from his 20-something nephew, Michael. Michael has made a series of bad decisions. He got involved in a risky business venture that collapsed, and now he owes a substantial amount of money to the wrong kind of people. He's scared, he's ashamed, and he needs £5,000 by the end of the day. Now, if this were a stranger or even a casual acquaintance, David's rational mind would take over. He would assess the risk. He would question the wisdom of the request. He would likely offer some advice and a polite but firm no. He has worked hard for his money and is not in the habit of bailing out foolish ventures. But this isn't a stranger. This is Michael. This is his sister's son. David remembers holding Michael as a baby. He remembers teaching him how to ride a bike. He sees his own family's eyes in Michael's face. He is not just an individual in need of a loan, he is family. In that moment, the principles we have discussed become secondary. He doesn't need social proof that helping is the right thing to do. The authority of a financial advisor would be irrelevant. The consistency of his past financial prudence is suddenly flexible. The scarcity of his own funds seems less important than the urgency of his nephew's crisis. He doesn't need to be persuaded. The request bypasses his logical brain and goes straight to his identity. A deep, ancient script is activated: you take care of your own. Before the day is out, David is at the bank. He wires the money. He has just made a financially questionable decision, but a deeply human one. He did it because of a force more powerful than any argument, the law of unity. This seventh and final law of influence proposes that the more we perceive someone as being part of us, the more easily and profoundly we will be influenced by them. It's about a shared identity. The other 6 laws are psychological tools often used by outsiders to build a bridge to us. Reciprocity, liking, authority, these are ways to gain compliance from someone who is fundamentally separate from you. Unity, however, is different. Unity is about declaring that there is no bridge to be built because you are already on the same side. The separation doesn't exist. When a unity connection is present, we don't just say yes more easily, we want to say yes. We want to help them because helping them feels like helping ourselves. The roots of this are buried deep in our evolutionary past. For millennia, humans survived not as rugged individuals, but as cohesive tribes. Sticking together, sharing resources, and defending one another against outsiders was the only way to endure a hostile world. Our brains evolved to quickly categorize people into 2 groups, us and them. Those in the us category were to be trusted and supported. Those in the them category were to be treated with suspicion and caution. This tribal instinct is still profoundly active within us today, and it can be triggered by several key pathways. The most potent of these pathways is kinship. As with the story of David and Michael, blood is the strongest bond. We will do things for our children, parents, and siblings that we would never dream of doing for anyone else. But this sense of kinship can also be invoked figuratively to create a powerful sense of unity. When a military leader refers to his soldiers as a band of brothers, he is tapping into this principle. When a social activist calls for sisterhood, she is doing the same. Leaders and marketers often use the language of family, the Walmart family, our motherland, to create a sense of shared identity and obligation that transcends a mere transactional relationship. A second powerful pathway to unity is place. This refers to a shared locality or geography. It can be as broad as a nation or as specific as a neighborhood. Think of the intense pride and loyalty people feel for their country, especially during the Olympics or a time of international crisis. The differences between them, political, social, economic, all melt away in the face of a shared national identity. The same effect happens on a smaller scale. If you are traveling in a foreign country and you hear someone with an accent from your hometown, you feel an instant, almost magnetic connection. They are one of yours. This shared sense of place creates an automatic assumption of rapport and trust. But perhaps the most interesting and actionable pathway to unity in the modern world is co-creation. This is the experience of creating something together. When people act together, especially in a collaborative and effortful way, they begin to merge their sense of self. They become a unit. A powerful example of this comes from the business world. Some of the most successful brands are those that have invited their customers to be part of the creative process. Lego's Ideas platform allows fans to submit their own designs for new sets. If a design gets enough votes, Lego will review it for production, and the fan creator gets a share of the revenue. These customers are no longer just consumers, they are co-creators. They have a vested, personal interest in the company's success. They feel like part of the team, and their loyalty is immensely powerful because it's rooted in a shared identity: we are Lego. So how do we navigate a world where this most powerful of influences is constantly at play? First, you must understand its immense power to build genuine, lasting connections. In your role as a leader, a parent, or a friend, focus on creating a sense of we. Use inclusive language. Instead of saying you need to do this, try here's what we need to accomplish. Emphasize shared goals and common values. Celebrate collective successes. When you are trying to build a team, don't just give them tasks, give them a project to co-create. The act of struggling, building, and succeeding together will fuse them into a unit more effectively than any team-building exercise. In your personal life, creating shared experiences and traditions is a direct path to strengthening the bonds of unity with your loved ones. Second, you must be acutely aware of the dark side of this law. The same tribal instinct that creates beautiful communities can also create brutal conflicts. The most dangerous and divisive ideologies in history have always relied on a distortion of unity. They work by defining us in a very narrow and exclusive way, and then positioning them as a threat. This us versus them mentality is the root of prejudice, racism, and war. When you hear a leader or a media outlet constantly emphasizing the differences between groups, using language that dehumanizes an other, you are witnessing the weaponization of unity. The ethical responsibility that comes with this law is to always seek to expand your circle of we. Be wary of anyone who asks you to shrink it. Finally, you can use the principle of unity to seek advice and influence more effectively. When you need help from someone, don't just focus on what you need. Focus on the identity you share. Instead of being a stranger asking for a favor, be the fellow alumnus, the fellow parent from your child's school, the fellow resident of your town. Begin by highlighting the genuine commonality. As a fellow member of this community, or for someone else who is passionate about this cause, this isn't a trick. It is a reminder to the other person that you are not an outsider. You are part of their tribe. And we are always more inclined to help our own. The 6 laws we explored before this are the tools of persuasion. The law of unity is the context in which those tools are either incredibly effective or almost completely useless. It is the ultimate amplifier. It reminds us that the greatest influence comes not from clever arguments or psychological tactics, but from genuine human connection. It is the final and most important lesson in the science of human behavior. If you want to influence others, don't try to be an interesting person. Be a relative. Be a member of the family, a citizen of the same hometown, a partner in a shared creation. Be one of them. Because when you are truly part of us, you will rarely have to ask for anything. You will simply be given it. Conclusion: the responsibility of knowledge. So, here we are, at the end of our journey together. Does the world look the same to you as it did when we began? Do the conversations you hear sound the same? When you watch an advertisement, see a politician speak, or negotiate with a colleague, do you still see only the surface of the interaction? Or do you now perceive the hidden currents flowing just beneath? You have been given a new lens, a key to unlock the invisible scripts that guide so much of human behavior. You can now see the weight of an unpaid debt and the quiet power of a genuine connection. You can feel the magnetic pull of the crowd and the long shadow of an expert's authority. You understand the panic of a closing door, the invisible web spun by your own words, and most profoundly, the irresistible bond of a shared identity. These 7 laws are not secrets whispered in the dark, they are the fundamental rhythms of our social world, playing out in every interaction, every relationship, every single day. The matrix has been revealed. But this revelation brings with it a profound and unavoidable question: what will you do with this knowledge? This new understanding is a form of power, and with all power comes a choice, and with that choice comes a responsibility. We began this journey by exploring the law of reciprocity, uncovering that ancient, powerful obligation to repay what we have received. We saw it in the surprising story of the Christmas card sent to strangers and in the strategic gift of the Hare Krishna. It taught us that influence often begins not with an ask, but with a genuine act of giving. From there, we delved into the law of liking, walking alongside the world's greatest salesman, Joe Girard, to understand that a bridge of rapport, built on authentic similarity and praise, can be more persuasive than any logical argument. We saw how the crowd sways us under the law of social proof, making us laugh at jokes that aren't funny and sometimes, tragically, making us stand still when we should be acting. We then confronted the unsettling power of the law of authority in Stanley Milgram's laboratory, a sobering reminder of how easily our own conscience can be outsourced to an expert in a lab coat. We felt the rush of panic and desire driven by the law of scarcity, learning from the colossal failure of New Coke that we often don't know how much we value something until it is taken away from us. We examined the intricate web of our own minds with the law of commitment and consistency, seeing how a tiny, initial yes can compel us to take monumental steps down a path we never intended. And finally, we arrived at the most fundamental principle of all, the law of unity, the understanding that the greatest influence is reserved for those we consider to be one of us, a member of our tribe. It would be easy to view these laws as a simple toolkit, a collection of tactics for learning how to convince people. But to do so would be to miss the entire point. This was never meant to be a manual for manipulation. Manipulation is a hollow and short-sighted game. It may win you a single transaction, but it will cost you the far more valuable prize of trust and a genuine relationship. The true purpose of this knowledge is not to become a more skilled puppeteer. It is to become a more conscious and perceptive human being. The first responsibility of this knowledge is defensive. You are now equipped to recognize these principles when they are being used on you. When a salesperson offers you a coffee and a small gift, you can smile, accept it, and consciously separate the warm feeling of reciprocity from the merits of the deal they are about to offer. When an advertiser tells you an offer is for a limited time only, you can now pause, take a breath, and separate your fear of loss from the actual value of the product. This knowledge is your shield. It empowers you to make choices with greater clarity and freedom, to ensure that your yes is a product of your own volition, not a reflexive response to a psychological trigger. But the greater responsibility is offensive, not in the sense of attack, but in the sense of proactive engagement with the world. It is the responsibility to use these principles with integrity to build better connections, foster greater understanding, and create positive change. You can use reciprocity to build goodwill by being the first to offer help. You can use liking to become a better leader by actively seeking out genuine commonalities with your team. You can use social proof to champion a good cause by gathering a coalition of early supporters. You can use your own authority not to command, but to guide with earned expertise and trust. You can use commitment and consistency to help yourself and others achieve goals by encouraging small, positive first steps. And most importantly, you can use the power of unity to build more inclusive and collaborative communities, to expand the circle of we. This audiobook, The 7 Laws of Influence That Actually Work, created by Prestige Mind Collections, was designed to be a beginning, not an end. It is a map to a new way of seeing the world. And if you have found this map valuable, if this journey has provided you with a new clarity, I ask you to consider the very first law we discussed, reciprocity. The most powerful way to solidify your own understanding is to share it with others. If this knowledge has empowered you, share this audiobook with a friend, a colleague, or a family member who might also benefit. Join the ongoing conversation about these ideas by leaving a review or a comment. Like this title if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more explorations into the fascinating world of human behavior. By sharing this knowledge, you are not just helping us, you are helping to create a more psychologically aware community, where people understand each other on a deeper level. You are now an observer. As you leave this audiobook and step back into your life, I want you to watch and listen. See these laws at play in the world around you. See them in your office, in your home, in the media you consume. Do not watch with cynicism, but with curiosity. See each interaction as a chance to understand the beautiful, complex, and predictable patterns of people. The world is your laboratory now. The study of persuasion is the study of humanity itself. Use this knowledge not to exploit our programming, but to connect with it, and in doing so, to connect more deeply with each other. Thank you for listening.